Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a video on how I prepare the cars for our first drive. So as you know, we store our cars for 6 months approximately, and during that time we go over a mechanical checklist and then we remedy all those issues during the winter months. But how do we get our cars ready for that first drive? And that's what we're going to go into in this video. So I've got the Acura CL to my left, I've got the Acura Legend behind me, and to my right, we're going to go into how I prep the car for that first start. How do you make sure that your car is going to start safely and last a long time is a question that most of you probably have at this point. So how do you protect things like your engine? How do you protect, your weather stripping? How do you protect your windshield? Things like windshields are discontinued at this point, the trim's discontinued, so we want to make sure that we don't need to replace those things that are so hard to get. Items like weather stripping, it's better to have the OEM one. So how do we make sure that they last a long time? Along with what are the things that you should be considering when you take your car out of storage? A lot of us don't daily our cars at this point, so it speaks to how do we make sure that we maintain them and don't need those crucial parts that are so hard to find. We're going to go into that. Additionally, we're going to take you along the ride to pick up some really rare wheels for the Acura Legend that are hard to come by, and we'll just show you everything that we do just to make sure that the car is safe. So hope you enjoy this video. Hope you learned something, but let's go ahead and get into it.
So one thing I do like to do before I even start the car is go over all the fluids. You want to make sure that your engine oil is in good condition. If you didn't change it before you stored it, you definitely want to do so now. That will ensure that you have good and clean oil running throughout your engine, and you won't have to worry about it being an issue while you're driving. The other thing is I always make sure that I check my transmission fluid. Now on a manual transmission, that's separate. It's a little bit different, but mine being an automatic, I have the dipstick right in the back there, which makes it easy to access. Additionally, brake fluid is another concern of mine. Since we have two reservoirs, we have the ABS unit over there on the left-hand side, and we have our master cylinder or your non-ABS reservoir on the right-hand side. I always make sure that that fluid is changed every year, particularly on the Legend. And the reason why on the Legend is because the ABS module over there likes to get gunked up with old brake fluid. Basically what happens is it turns into crystals, and as those crystals form, it makes it really hard for the internal components to move, such as the motor and the cylinders that are inside that module. So I go ahead and change that brake fluid every year. We'll also do a different video that'll show you how to bleed that system in the future. But for right now, just know that that brake fluid, you can easily just suck out and put new fluid in. Same with this. Now you could do a full bleed, and we are gonna do that later down the road. And we're gonna replace some brake lines and upgrade the front calipers on this car to the Type 2 calipers. So we're not going to necessarily do that right now, but we will change the brake fluid over on the ABS module just to give it that freshness. The other thing is you want to check your level on your power steering fluid. Your power steering fluid is this reservoir over here on the left-hand side. Just make sure that it's full, but also if you haven't changed it in a couple years, go ahead and change that fluid. I do the method of suck it out, fill it up, run the car, suck it out, fill it up, and then run the car again. For the most part, that'll give you a changeover of the fluid. It's really hard to get all the fluid changed over because of the steering rack. That fluid goes into your steering rack. The other thing, make sure that your coolant is topped off. You should have fresh coolant in there. I'm not one of those people that necessarily says you have to run the Honda type coolant fluid in there, but I personally do run the Honda type coolant fluid in there. There are special additives in there that help with the seals in your radiator. So although I don't necessarily force people, so to speak, to use that, I do recommend using the Honda blue coolant. The other thing is make sure that you look over all your accessory belts. Your accessory belts should be fresh, not cracked. They should be clean in a sense that they're not like fraying or otherwise degrading. So make sure that you look over your belts. If all of that checks out and you have a good fresh battery, which is another key component, I always make sure that we have our battery stored on a tender to make sure that we can use it as soon as those summer months come. The other thing is make sure you got some windshield washer fluid. Simple things like that. Another thing, I make sure that my air filter is clean. Reason being is I run a K&N air filter that's reusable, washable, etc. But you could also just make sure that you replace it every about 15,000 miles there. So let's go into some of the other areas that on this car that I make sure are tip top before I start the car for that first time. So one of the first places I start is with tires. I want to make sure that I have good tires and tires that are safe to travel on. So as you see here, we've got our tires and we want to make sure that they're properly inflated to the correct PSI. And you can find this information on the inside of your door. You also want to take a look at your tread patterns to make sure that they're wearing evenly and don't need to be rotated. Because these cars are front wheel drive, being the Acura Legend I'm speaking to, we might need to rotate our tires from the front to the back. And that will allow us to increase the longevity of our tires by evenly wearing them. Additionally, if your car is lowered like our Legend is here on H&R Springs, you may have negative camber, which will wear on the inside. So make sure that you look at the full tread pattern to make sure that your treads are safe. Additionally, while you're here and topping off your PSI to the correct pressure, you want to take a look at this oval right here on your tire. This oval right here is the date stamp of manufacturing for this tire, 2920. What that means is the 29th week of the year 2020. Tires are typically good for about 6 years. So if your tire is more than 6 years old, it's time to replace them. That's a safety issue. Sidewalls weaken, as well as the compound starts to harden, and you can see cracking along the sides of your tires. If you see any symptoms that show that there's a degradation of the tire itself, it may be time to replace it. So don't just go by the date, but also make sure that you're within that 6-year time period as a general rule of thumb. So one of the other things that you want to do before you take the car out on that first drive is, are all your lights working? Doing a check on all your lights to make sure that your lights are fully functioning, just like my headlights, and your brake lamps are all in operating order will not only make sure that you'll have a good and safe drive, but it will allow you to take care of those issues before you get pulled over for them. So just do a quick safety check on all your lights, make sure that they work, and you'll be good to go. One of the other things that I do that I think is very important is with the fuel itself. So I always make sure that I have the fuel topped off and I put stable in there to make sure that the fuel doesn't degrade while it's sitting for about 6 months. But what I also do is I run through that fuel as fast as I can and then put in a fuel cleaning agent such as Techron. Techron is designed to clean those injectors. After your car sits for a long time, just like brake fluid, it starts to harden and crystallize at the end of your fuel injectors. This will ensure that your fuel injectors don't get gummed up and stop performing to the performance that you like. So make sure you put some fuel additive to clean out your fuel system when you first start it up. The other thing I look for is any leaks underneath your car. You should look and make sure that your transmission, your engine oil, etc. isn't leaking out. If you see visible leaks while the car is off, that is concerning. You should also look for leaks when you first start the car up. But let's go ahead and jump into the interior and show you what I do there. So on the interior of the car, I always make sure to clean the leather and condition it. I see so many Legends nowadays with leather that is just beat up, and we also spent a lot of money on our leather to rewrap these in our restoration series. So I try to make sure that they're clean and well conditioned so that they stay pliable and don't dry out. So that is a key step that I always do on the interior to make sure that the leather is going to stay for a long time in good condition. Every component such as the leather wrap steering wheel, my shifter, all of those get that treatment. Your door cards right here, these are all leather. So you want to make sure that you keep them conditioned. These parts are very hard to replace. Although you could probably find a shop that'll do it, they're going to charge you a large amount. So why not invest in a good leather conditioner to make sure that you keep your leather fresh and not cracked? The other thing that I always do before I take the car out for that first drive is make sure that my dash is UV protected. And I use a product such as 303 because it is a UV protection cleaner. So not only do I clean the dash, but I put that UV protectant on there. Anybody who owns a Legend will know that dashes crack very easily. So why not take the couple seconds it takes to wipe it down with a UV protectant and resolve some of those issues from happening? I also make sure that the whole interior is clean. I vacuum it out. But more importantly, what I want to focus on in here besides cleaning is what do I do before I start that engine for the first time. So let's go into the fuse panel here. Our fuse panel holds all the fuses for our car, but more importantly, you'll see this one called the fuel pump. Before I start the car for the first time, I pull this fuse. And the reason why I do that is I want to crank the car and build oil pressure. I don't necessarily just want to go from 6 months of sitting to the car just jumping up to 1500 RPMs with a cold start without making sure that vital oil is spread throughout the engine and that pressure is there to help with those vital components. So I always pull that fuse, crank the car for about 10 seconds or so to build that pressure up. Then I go ahead and replace that fuel pump fuse. That will allow you to crank the car without starting it, build that pressure, and then you can go ahead and replace that fuse and start it for that first time. So that is a key tip I think I want to bestow upon people is make sure that if you're going to store your car, you're not driving it very often, build that oil pressure before you start that engine after sitting for so long. The engine oil has dripped down from the head and is now in the pan. Your vital components are no longer protected with that layer of oil. This will help ensure that that happens. One of the other things I do is I use a product called Shinitsu grease. Shinitsu grease is the same silicone based grease lubricant that the factory uses to make sure that all your critical weather seals remain nice and pliable, just like this. You can see how mine are nice and pliable and they're not cracked or torn. And the way I get by with that is with Shinitsu grease. This also makes sure that you have a nice good seal and so air noise doesn't get through. Something that's very annoying is air noise coming through all of this. So you can see I even have still a little bit of Shinitsu grease right there if I can get the camera to focus. So all you need is a pea-sized amount and just rub it in just like that. And you can see how that door seal just looks so perfect right now. And that's because I hit these all the time with Shinitsu grease. And you can use it on every rubber product. So I even do it on the outside. I use it on the trunk seals, any little rubber component, just like this. Go ahead and hit it with a little bit of a pea-sized amount from the Shinitsu tube here. Now this tube is a little expensive. It's about $25, but this will last you a lifetime. So over the course of your ownership, whether it be an Acura CL, an Acura Legend, or other car, you can use it on almost any rubber seal and it will make it conditioned and last a long time. So a good investment. So that's one tip. The other thing is go ahead and get some silicone based spray. I make sure that I hit all my door joints with silicone spray, even my door handle, so that I have nice and smooth operation. Silicone spray, it's not only a cleanant, but it's a lubricant. So it will help make sure that your vital parts, such as your hood struts, stay in good condition. I take a little bit of silicone spray on a rag and I hit it right here and just wipe it down and clean it. That will make sure that that hood strut stays in good operation for a long time. And probably one of the last tips I'll give you is making sure that you have fresh wipers on there. Wipers can be cleaned and they can last a little while, but one of the things that I find annoying is to go into a road trip and not have fresh wipers because they'll miss and you'll have visibility issues. And nowadays, with these cars, they're relatively cheap to get just a basic summer set. I don't take this car in any inclement weather really. So it's really just critical to make sure that you have good wipers and that they're functioning. So go ahead and make sure that you put those on there. They're only a couple bucks anyways. So if everything checks out and you said, I don't have any problems or I resolved all my problems, then it's time to start the car for that very first time. Now, one of the things I'll say is that first start can be a little nerve-wracking. And nerve-wracking because it may not immediately start, or you may hear some weird noises. Although those weird noises aren't necessarily normal and can be indicative of a bigger issue, when you first start a car, you're going to hear some things that you probably don't hear during your daily operation of it or your more routine operation of a car because they still haven't had all the lubrication from sitting for so long. So once you start to use the car, the engine will smooth out. Some of the things on your first drive you'll notice like, oh, there's a humming noise or a buzzing noise. Those aren't things that you necessarily should ignore, but just see if they resolve on their own if they weren't there before storage. So exercise the car, as they say, and things might start to work again. Also, make sure that you check the car for after that first run for any significant leaks that weren't present while it was sitting because seals dry up. Like I was talking about lubricating those seals. Sometimes those seals dry up and sometimes they fail because they weren't lubricated while they were sitting. So you may discover new problems. So just go into it eyes wide open and understand where your problems may lie. So, I hope this video was educational for you. Let's go ahead and get our legend out on the road for the first time. All right, we just got back from picking up these wheels, and anybody in the Legend community will know that these are the sought-after OEM wheels, the 16-inch that came on the 93 to 95 Acura LS and the GS sedans. So these are pretty hard to come by now, and we got these for a good deal, but as you can see, they're a bit rough. So we will have to restore these at some point. For right now, let's just clean them up and see how good or bad they are. And we'll also have to source another one of these since one was missing. So we'll get on that as well. Hopefully most of this is just dirt, but here's the before. So let's take a look at the after. All right, and here we are with our simple cleaning job on these wheels. So you saw what they looked like beforehand, really grimy, really dirty, and it really shined up well with just some simple green degreaser, some agitation, and a wheel specific cleaner. We did have to do some more work on the back here to get that to look better. You can see how it's almost like a 50-50 if you look at it that way. You can see the on the left side some really aggressive dirt, grime, and buildup over there. The whole wheel looked like that, and now we've got it looking pretty good. We do have to do a little bit more work to get this where we want it to be. The goal here is, can we get these wheels good enough to perhaps put on for some car shows? If not, then we'll have to have them restored. And we'll go down the path of how much will that cost, and will we be doing it ourselves, or will we have to hire a professional to do this? Since we like to do everything as a DIY, we'll try to figure out if we can do that ourselves before hiring a professional. So stay tuned for some of that work, maybe in the next couple months here. And to wrap up this video, we told you we would go into what we're going to do with the windshield. As you know, we take our car on a lot of trips during the summer months to car shows and the National Acura Legend meet. So we want to make sure that our original, yes, that is correct, this is a 1992 original windshield in our Acura Legend. So we want to make sure that it is protected against rock chips and other debris on the road as we're traveling. These windshields are discontinued, the trim is discontinued, so it would be quite a bear for us to source another windshield and trim set. So we're going to go ahead and install a protective film over our windshield. And this protective film will allow rocks and other debris to hit, and it won't allow the windshield to crack because that membrane will absorb the impact, allowing your windshield to stay whole, or at least that's the idea. So let's go ahead and get our car to the shop so that we can get the windshield protective film installed, and we'll tell you what we think of it so far. All right, so we just got back from having the windshield film installed and we got a car wash in while it was nice and sunny. So let's talk about the film. So the film is Expel based and you can barely tell it's even on. So they tuck it in real nice and close to the seal there so that it doesn't even look like it's on there. But what this film is a protective layer that allows you to see through it so that when rock chips occur, it's going to absorb that impact and so that the windshield won't crack. And that's very important to us. So we've got a real nice layer of Expel film on there. On the inside, driving it back, you barely notice it. A little bit of distortion, and that's about it. So how long does this film last? That's a great question. So this film, depending on how many times you use your wipers and how clean your wipers are, can last as little as a year or it can last for multiple years. So for us, this was a good investment because we're not going to drive the car that much. It barely sees any rain, if at all, and we'll never really use the wipers. So for 450 bucks, yes, that's how much we paid, 450 bucks. Yes, a little bit of an investment, but far less than having to replace the windshield and far less time invested in replacing the windshield as well. So I'll drop a link to the product that we use for this. It was a professionally installed product. We tried to do it ourselves, didn't work out successfully. So I'll go ahead and drop the information down below. Maybe you can find an Expel dealer near you that can go ahead and install this film if you're looking to do that. And we'll see you on the next one. So I realized that you might want to see from the inside what this film does. You can see that there is really no hint whatsoever that this film is even in place. There is a little bit of distortion, like I mentioned, but I think your eyes will adjust to it over time. At least mine did on the way back. So it's really not even that noticeable if you're just driving right along. But like I said, so this is going to be a investment in making sure that we don't get a cracked windshield. And I'll even note on the way back, I was following a truck, and sure enough, I heard a rock hit the windshield. But because we had that protective film layer, it wasn't even a worry. So just wanted to chime in real quick before the end of the video so you knew what it looked like from the inside.